My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Hey, this is Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast, here to help you make the most of your summer with Michelob Ultra, a superior light beer worth playing for. Play for it with the guys when you're competing to see who can sink more birdies on the golf course, because winning tastes even better with Ultra on the line. Play for Ultra. Fill your fridge with Michelob Ultra this summer. Enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Anheuser-Busch Michelob Ultra Light Beer, St. Louis, Missouri.
Not all meals are created equal. For instance, breakfast has the spicy egg McMuffin for a limited time, and lunch doesn't. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. Anna Moschovakis is a poet, translator, and novelist, and her latest novel, An Earthquake is a Shaking of the Surface of the Earth, draws on all of those skills and preoccupations in performing a black comedy, murder mystery thriller of philosophical dimensions. If that description seems a little opaque, never fear, as the novel holds its reader tightly, even as the idea of plot and structure is intentionally disturbed. Set in a world not so unfamiliar, where major and minor earthquakes unsettled the Earth's surface to the point of destabilizing most human activities, our unnamed narrator finds herself barely able to walk in this new eco-dystopian reality, and she begins to knit a tale of murderous desire, specifically her drive to kill her former roommate, Tala. As a loose plan takes shape, we venture back into the narrator's history as a middling actor trying desperately to attach herself to language and movement that feels authentic to herself and to her audience. Her memories of a search for method in an upside-down world press into the nature of language as our only tool for self-expression, but a tool that too often fails to translate properly. A novel that provides no level ground, An Earthquake is the Shaking of the Surface of the Earth, delights us with its formal and generic play, making use of the emotional resonance of a psychological thriller without ever succumbing to its expected tropes. In the end, what drives the narrative is as much our own anxieties about authenticity and language as it is the narrator's. And that state of unease makes for a powerful reading experience. Anna's most recent book is Participation. A poet and translator, Anna has won the James Laughlin Award for her poetry and shared the 2021 International Booker Prize with David Diop for his novel, At Night, All Blood is Black. A student of plants and herbalism, she is a member of the publishing collective Ugly Duckling Press and a co-founder of Bushel Collective. Welcome to Burned by Books, Anna.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here talking with you.
I'm so pleased that you're here to talk about this amazing book. I'm going to start by referencing a novelist that I find is far too underread in the United States and outside of South Africa, the writer Ivan Vladislavich, who said in an interview that when writing novels, he felt like if the ground was too solid underneath his readers' feet, that he would want to shake them and destabilize them, often with irony. Yours is a novel about a woman who is destabilized in all the meanings of that word. But I want to start with the ways in which you want to destabilize the reader. How does that come into your craft and form?
Oh, wow. Yeah. First of all, I don't know that writer, and I just wrote it down. I'm very excited to discover a new writer.
Vladislav
Um,
is amazing and would absolutely read him.
Very excited. I mean, maybe this connects in a certain way, in a funny meta way to your question, but I I sort of stumbled into fiction. I'm very, I think, underread in fiction. I mean, I've read a lot of fiction, but I never formally studied literature, the novel. So I'm constantly being reminded of names that I've heard of and sort of know about or have never heard of, and it's kind of, I do think that's connected in a way to the way that I have come to write novels, which sort of came through translating them. Like I only got the confidence from practicing the craft of writing a novel through writing other people's novels. So I think there's a way in which confusion is a certain kind of confusion or bewilderment is at the core of both my experience of the world that I want to transmit in art, and also a little bit my experience of writing fiction anyway. So because I get really kind of, if I, things like, where are we? Who's writing this? Who's reading this? What is it to, what is it to sort of like create a world and put it through in this way where there's a narrator who's not really a narrator, and there's the time of writing and there's the time, but we all know that it took longer to write the book than it did to read it. Like all of those things are already so unsettled for me. So I think there's a certain disorientation in all of the fiction that I write that's there, partly because I want it to be there and partly because that is where I am with this project of writing fiction. So with this book, I mean, I started to write it. It's funny, I'm sitting right now in the very, very tiny, it's like a hallway in this small house in Southern California where I spent a lot of the pandemic, and it's my partner's house. And there wasn't like a extra room for me to do my teaching, my remote teaching or anything from. It's this hallway, literally. But it has
No room of your own.
no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, and nor, by the way, did he. I mean, he was in the living room. I was in the hallway. The kids were in the other rooms. But it looks out onto this square of patio, which is extremely ragged. And so, anyway, so I did write it, but it's just funny that I'm sitting here where I start. I mean, where I wrote the first sentence of the book. But yeah, I was, as a person with the sort of politics and interests that I have, I was not, hope not made hopeful by 2020 per se, but I certainly couldn't stifle a sense of possibility, that mutual aid was happening, people unmasking was happening. Wearing masks helped to unmask so many things about just our world, and all the names people give it, late capitalism, liberalism, settler colonialism, and that moment was was the that trope about, or I don't know if it's sort of a psychological truism, that anxious people get calm in anxious times, right? So I was personally experiencing that. Like I always have this excess of anxiety, but I'm, good in a crisis, calm in a crisis, right? So, and I think a lot of, there was this mass experience of that where people who were like, yeah, everything's always been wrong, and now everyone agrees everything's wrong, and now we are the ones who sort of, I don't know, hold a a position of epistemic reliability or something, right?
Mhm.
And so I was interested in that. When I started to actually, you know, really write this book, like when the first sentence went down, usually the way that I write stuff has been circling in my head forever, and I don't know what form it's going to take. But that was a moment, right, when people were beginning. It was about like the fall of 2020, the very end of the fall of 2020, and I think disappointment after the uprisings was beginning to settle. COVID was rising again, but people also were being told to go back to work. And it was sort of the decline of the sense of possibility in some ways. And so that was where I was. And I think I was really confused. And also I use the word confused to mean a lot of different things. I realized, like in conversation and other things, but I was upset, I guess, and confused by how many people who had previously said, like, previously sort of come aboard with like, let's not go back to normal. Normal wasn't good. Who were then sort of sliding
just
back
like
into
jump
actually normal would be really nice. Yeah. So I was just looking at what that means, right? To have things be sort of totally uprooted and upended, but also like a kind of maybe inner intuition that it's not, that this uprootedness isn't actually any worse, than some false sense of stability. And a kind of like excitement at the thought of learning to walk again. So all that stuff was like resonating with
Yeah,
ordinary.
I'm seeing it now, kind of running in various courses through the novel. You're doing something very interesting with genre, and I think one of the things that I'm seeing now is, as someone not specifically trained in the craft of fiction, perhaps you have an easier time navigating without having to, rely on set tropes, because you're doing something with thriller and mystery, and you develop intrigue and tension, which is something I love about the book, as the narrator becomes more and more obsessed with the idea of killing her roommate Tala. But you remove the context for the feelings in these novels. We're left with affect, but very little to hold on to corroborate or dismiss the narrator's anxieties and sense of reality. So can you tell us about kind of that stripping down of genre to its affective qualities to get it to operate emotionally?
Yeah, totally. I love that question because it makes me think about a lot of different things. I mean, for one thing, it makes me think about my first novel, Eleanor, or The Rejection of the Progress of Love, which literally began with a desire, a challenge to myself to write a book that about a character with no backstory, and where we never find out the backstory, but we still care about just the emotion. I was interested in sort of how when you certain kinds of meditation or mindfulness practices would say let go of the narrative, just be with the feeling, and I was like, what is that? And could you write a book that's like just be with the feeling, where the narrative doesn't matter, right? And so I am really interested, I think, in the ways in which narrative, and I'll get to genre in a minute, but the ways in which just narrative and coherent narrative, or the desire for sense making through narrative, the way that threads from, you know, the political world, people's own individual psychological healing, through, through every discipline, right? Every through advertising, through capitalism, through any attempt to organize society, and then and then like comes into fiction, the way that those are all interconnected, but narrative has different things at stake in each of these realms, like very different things at stake. And it's almost never a good idea to have the narrative be too formulaic or closed, right? Like it's almost never good for the people who are being sold or offered the narrative to be preconceived and closed. At the same time, I'm super aware of in my body also, like really aware of the pleasures of convention, in terms of, and the way I see convention in that way is sort of what you're talking about. Let's talk like musically, right? Like I was brought up I played piano and violin, and I learned music theory, and just the way that one is sort of trained to expect a resolution after, like in the next note that you expect to come, and then
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
the composer begins with that expectation and then veers from it to like create excitement, or like to delay the resolution, right? So I know that these desires for, and is that culture, or is that nature, or is that both, right? It doesn't almost matter in a way, but I'm aware of the like true pleasure of expectation that comes from, repeated exposure to a pattern, let's say, and then deviating from that, right? So I'm not uninterested in playing out the pleasures of genre, like on a philosophical or something level. But like I'm in that space, right, where novelty is very seductive to me. But all of that said, I love I love the I love a page turner, right? I do. I really am just kind of libidinally excited by wanting, by what's the word, like time-based art, basically, right? Like, I mean, I can look at paintings, I can read with a lot of pleasure types of literature that don't rely on you turning the page, and those exist, like where, I have a desire to provide that, to have that experience and provide that experience. But I'm very aware that like my way of doing that is like, I want to write page turners that will be page turners for like 100 people or 1,000 people or however many people might agree with it. I think that's always what I'm going for is like, yeah, basically borrowing all the tricks without like, while keeping it a little fuzzy where they're from, because that's my prerogative. I get to do this. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not claiming anything. I'm just writing books. And so I just kind of, it's the things, it's the forms and tropes and yeah, affective actions that different genres can do, that it's the ones that work on me that I try to find a way to use, not so much consciously, but I just feel it. I'm like, oh, this needs like a little, something to make me excited about what's going to come.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Everyone who works at Starbucks, full or part-time, gets stock in our company simply for being part of our company. That's why we call our employees partners, because when Starbucks succeeds, our people do too. And that success turns into down payments, family vacations, and so much more. At Starbucks, benefits like company stock are just the start. Learn more about how we support partners at starbucks.com/partners.
Today's top story, the flavor merger of the century between the Peanut Butter Group and Chocolatey Corp. Joining me is a PBC executive.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Now, how did you know the merger and the byproduct of it, Jif peanut butter and chocolate flavored spread, would be a success?
It was a gut feeling, a rumbling, if you will. Besides, they're two titans of taste.
Very true. Goes great with pretzels.
And pancakes.
Apples too, I bet. Try Jif PBC today.
So our narrator is, I think, very importantly, a former actor, where we come to understand formerly a rather middling one. And we get a recounting of a disaster that essentially ends her career. And I'd love it if you'd be willing to read us a section of that memory of the end of acting.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Okay. This is about, just for context, this is page 10 of a book that starts on page 3, so it's pretty close to the beginning. The last time I was cast in a play, it ended in disaster of the career-ending, unmitigated kind. I was perfectly up to the task. Something ancient, an outdoor theater, actually 2 theaters 100 feet apart. On a vast sloping lawn, the audience was expected to traverse at will, choosing their adventure, each to each, depending on which aspect of the story most compelled them. The setting for this decentralized performance was a state park in the middle of the city, one of those parks that rise up improbably from neighborhoods, and that, once you cross some trafficy boulevard and enter them, are designed to feel wild. In this case, they'd succeeded to a fault. Foraging happened there, and the rumored hunting of rabbits and birds. Mountain lion sightings were rare, and attacks rarer, but not unheard of. Once, a crocodile showed up in the duck pond at the park's edge and had to be shot by some city entity nobody had ever heard of, called Wildlife Evict and Rescue. The park and the theater aren't more than a couple of miles from this bungalow, this bed. They feel so far. The disaster occurred in the 3rd act, in the final performance of the play's final run, in a scene that involved a ritual slaughter in which I was the one with the knife. The speech I was delivering was hectic, opaque. I'd had to call upon all of my training to fill the outdated words with life. It was a Sunday matinee. The sun had begun to dip in the sky. We were well past the solstice, though that wouldn't have struck me then, and was positioned, not accidentally on the part of the production designers, to serve as a spotlight for this scene. A spotlight for me, for my speech. My lower lip trembled as I raised the knife and shrieked. There is something that happens when the audience is with you. Just because attempts to describe it are always pathetic, always self-serving, canned, tied to metaphors that not only fail as metaphor, but that fail on their own terms, as if an actor wants the audience frozen, hypnotized, or wrapped around their finger, wants it eating from the palm of their hand. Doesn't make it untrue. There is something that happens when the audience is with you, and there is something that happens when it turns on you. My memory of that moment is unclear. In my memory, people suddenly rose from the crowd in several small clusters, signs, screams, banners, red paint, eggs, a protest against something. My speech, my character's imminent, violent act. I stood there, knife high. I went up on my lines, first time in years. One cohort of the protesters was chanting something I couldn't understand, quietly beneath their breath. They were the charismatic ones. They threw nothing. They didn't scream. It wasn't clear whose attention they were trying to get. And they were the ones who caused me, or perhaps only invited me, to halt the performance and address the audience with an apology that rose up in me from who knows where. I don't recall how the apology began. It wasn't much. I wasn't eloquent. The sun was fully in my face. Against that brightness, everything went dark. The strangest sensation occurred in me then. I have tried to find words for it ever since. Tried and failed. The best I can do is to say that, for an instant, all separation between myself and others vanished. Not a melting or a fusing, more a disintegration or a dissolution. But none of those descriptions are right. When I say others, I don't mean only other people. The audience, the yelling protesters, the murmuring witches, the stagehands in the wings, but also other things, both tangible and not. I mean the stage itself, the stage sets, the portable footlights and movable backdrops. I mean the birds and the sounds they were making, the grass and the boulders beyond, the trees. I mean the clothes I was wearing and the clothes everyone was wearing. I mean even the prop knife in my own hand. This is what I remember. I need you to know that it's breaking, I said. I was mic'd. My soft words traveled electronically through the air. Something is happening, I said. Something is happening and I don't understand. I'm only telling you so that whatever happens next, you'll know why. The sensation passed, and I could see what was in front of me again, by which I mean I could feel there was again a me in front of which the what remained. I should say that now the audience was with me again, not in the way they were with me before the interruption, in the other way, the better way, for which there is no battery of bogus metaphors, the way we actors don't even bother trying to describe. I directed the rest of my address to the charismatic ones, downstage left. I was neither brilliant nor original, but I remember the feeling of believing what I said. You're right. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing, and we keep doing it anyway. But I should speak for myself. I should only speak for myself. But I'm an actor. I don't speak. I repeat, just an actor. Interprète. I only repeat, rehearse, repeat, rehearse, repeat. How strange. I never noticed. I somehow never noticed how there's a hearse in re. And then the knife dropped from my hand, and I fell to the stage and vomited.
Thank you. That was really lovely, and I think gives us and my audience a real sense of how the mind of our narrator works, and the importance of acting to the novel as a way of thinking through the collision of words and the body and a feeling of inauthenticity. An actor has to bring together the physical and the metaphysical in a way that, I don't know if we want to say, fools the audience into believing that they're another person. This is another way of speaking about, I believe, the very crisis of human authenticity of words and body. The narrator's acting professor implies to his class at one point that most people live inauthentically, and to live authentically, one must pass through a state of anxiety. What does acting tell us about the disconnect between our language and our body, and what it might mean to live authentically?
So I did study acting. It was my first love in the arts. The ways in which all the great, theorists of theater, whether the ones in the traditions of Stanislavski and all of Stanislavski's disciples, the more experiential performance theorists who aren't even looking to make plays that sort of on the surface are quote unquote believable or whatever, but they're all still circling around some question of like, what door is opened within pretending that leads us to something that is always named with a totally unsatisfying word like truth or authenticity or whatever, right? But there's something that I could always recognize in those formulations. I could feel sort of a stillness, meaning a couple of people in the same room on the same page, to use another metaphor. And that it was unpredictable how those would happen, and it would happen through artifice, right? So all of that, when you're in the realm of talking about art or practice or craft, is like contained almost, right? And we have, and I think that there tends to be an idea that like it's all well and good as long as as long as boundaries are kept, and then flip to the whole other side of that, which is an interest that I had also from my own experience in psychology and dissociation in places where the boundaries aren't really kept, right? Like in dangerous spaces, and then in the vulnerabilities and possibilities that come from those limit spaces of not being sure if you're in a fiction or a reality, or not being sure if you're in control. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. You did a really, I think, able job of pulling together all these different ways in which, we discover along the way, even as we're trying to discover ourselves, that we learn the ways in which these destabilized senses of self and truth and context are kind of this powerful mode of understanding the world through not understanding, and through coming to these moments of being deeply unsettled and having anxiety be the primary driver of that, which I think joins together for me the physicality of unsettling that these earthquakes have in the life of the narrator, but also in just life on the earth in this novel. It's impossible to feel a kind of stable ground beneath you in this world because you're always anticipating the next shakeup. And there are hints of a tilt that has happened in the economic and social world where things are unraveling or have perhaps already come unspooled. These quakes are symbolic and they're very literal. And as a reader, we have to live in the liminal space in which they are both at the same time. And they are Schrodinger's quakes. Could you take us through that liminal space that readers really have to settle into, settling into the unsettled space of the quake in the novel?
Yeah, I love that question too. When I write a book and put it in the world, it really feels like an experiment to me, right? It's like, I wonder what if anyone will, if anyone will connect to this, and if so, if they'll connect to it in ways that I could have anticipated, and I think I say that because it's not like that's not a stance. It's actually the only thing I can do, I think, when I write is try to be accurate to my own sensations, whether
Mhm.
that's via fiction or in poetry or what have you. And so I think that the there's nothing to get that's not there on the page. You know what I mean? And so what a reader would need to settle in, or what I needed to return to when I returned to the text as I was working on it was simply, what does it really feel like? Like what is
Yeah.
so there is a sort of sh- shadow of or there's like a ghost pandemic, you know, setting to the book in the sense that there's been a kind of pause that I think a reader will understand to be happening kind of quote unquote outside the narrator's mind,
Okay.
but also happening differently to each character in the book, which of course is how the deepest lockdown portions of the COVID-19 pandemic affected people, right? Very, very differently, and yet somehow
Yeah.
universally also.
And
So
you would get kind of whispers of how things were for other people, and they would feel both real and very surreal. And that's how I feel about in this book, the sort of I think I'm right in thinking that, we've come to the end of like people paying for their mortgages, for
right.
example. Real economic things have happened, but we hear about it in a kind of a whisper campaign more than we see it in its real physicality.
Right, right. And exactly. And so, now I'm remembering, so earlier I said, liberation was this big word for you. Of course, the other side of that is power, right? Or the, the other component of that is thinking about power in the most generic way. And one of the things that happened in that period of time was that everyone's everyone. I mean, I think it was a common thing for very, very local experiences of power to get jostled and rearranged, right? So, from the family structure, people who were in relationships and they were stuck with somebody and suddenly it wasn't going to work anymore, and to jobs, the bits of material humanity, the human is the wrong word, but the sort of the decency, the accidental decency of giving people a little bit more money in their bank accounts in this country, the relief provided for many people an opportunity to reflect a little bit more. But simply the distance, the physical distance from, for instance, a workplace with a boss who was a jerk, right? People started to organize in certain places, like just that this breath of difference and pause allows, we talked about the masks coming off in terms of large subjects of the world, which certainly is true. I mean, I think we all saw that, but also in everybody's individual life, different things get revealed when you go at a different pace and when there's different pressures on you on every minute of your day. And the millions and millions of small revolutions that happened in people's lives because of a rearrangement of who had control of whose time. And it wasn't always in a good direction or in a liberatory direction, but it was certainly it was sort of like this multiplication millionfold of small universes of who controls what and where relief comes. I was so interested in how vast it was to imagine that. And like you're saying, getting little glimpses here and there. And then also that, you know, in sort of mass gaslighting,
Yeah.
those breaths are really important. And in the research, quote unquote, because research always just feels like fun to me when it's for a novel. The research I've been doing and keep doing about specific instances of, what we lump in as cults, but groups that people join wanting something and then get taken advantage of. Usually the downfall happens when there's been some kind of pause, like the leader gets sick for a while or has to go somewhere or dies or, circumstances change enough that a couple of that people can start to turn to each other and say, what's really happening here, right? So that breath was something that was really interesting to me. But of course, it also unsettling in different ways for each person.
Absolutely.
The number one selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an Enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
So I'm very interested in Tala, especially in the context that you've given us about thinking about gender and gender identity and fixed versus unfixed identities. And I think of Tala as like a quake who has shaken our narrator loose from her moorings. She's the younger roommate who has disappeared, leaving the narrator with a sense that Tala must be expunged from the living. She plans a murder and works through a rationale for how it would bring her stability and wholeness and an identity that was visibly authentic. But Tala feels both viscerally real and like an absence, a ghost of something dead or gone in the narrator. And this is surely connected to this desire to have a kind of fixed identity and expression of that identity. And I wonder if you'd talk about Tala in the context of gender and the desire for something fixed and authentic when it comes to an identity that is affixed to a particular gender.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Tala is the big mystery of the book, and I really like how you introduced her just now, and I think her status in the book is up for interpretation and in the ways that you mention. Okay, and I think when you talk about gender, like I used to think this all the time, actually consciously as part of my experience of sexism. I'm a white person, educated, I guess I call myself cisgender, but I also feel like I don't know what I would, I don't know what I am against the gender binary, let's say. But in terms of the way I move through the world, I have very few obstacles except this big one of having been raised as a girl, and being in spaces like the philosophy department where I went to school, where there were plenty of women students, but almost no women or non-male professors, and almost no readings by people who were not men. So I was very conscious, even at that time, even as I experienced all kinds of insecurities and alienation, I was also always really conscious that like there was a kind of freedom in knowing that I wasn't gonna be entering into that fray as like a competitor. You know what I mean? The silver lining of that was I get to stay nimble on the outside of this hierarchy or this anxiety of influence. Yeah. So to come back to Tala, I think there was a sort of magic trick that I wouldn't be able to finish, I guess, in a way. Like, so just putting something in there that with Tala that allows a couple of different questions to enter the book. And I think one of them is kind of what is it like to have bridged exactly the period of time that my generation has bridged in terms of gender identity, right? So we're young enough now to be, some of us, to be like excited by and really open to and really embracing of a certain kind of dissolving. I'm being very like positive about all of this because I feel that it's positive in the long run, and also now in a lot of ways. So we're flexible enough, and there are many much older people who are also flexible enough and excited by that. And I'm just so fascinated by what that means for a middle-aged person reflecting on their life now and trying to connect to their younger self,
Yeah.
and not project into what that, I'm constantly like, my students come through and I'm like, you are so much more sophisticated than I am in every possible, or than I was. I mean, than I am too.
Very true.
Than I was at that age. If I try to remember what I was writing or what I was thinking, I mean, and I thought, my friends and I thought we were like really going deep into, we were the weirdo intellectuals or whatever. But they're so much more sophisticated. So it's hard to almost know what to do with like questions about what I could have done differently, or how do I understand what I did or didn't do, or how do I sort of heal or forgive myself for ways in which I betrayed myself when I was younger, when the world, what we were up against was just different. And so I think putting her there, she kind of arrived into the story very early on, and I remain interested in the figure of younger and older versions or projections onto real people that invoke younger or older versions, and what we can learn from those projections that doesn't have to always be domineering, or because so often the way we project onto people can be hurtful or violent, but what can actually be learned in that space. So yeah, all of that was in there, how it comes out. And, but then I also wanted to write that page turner.
Yeah.
For me and the 12 other people who might find it thus.
I think it's a page turner for anybody who picks it up.
Yeah.
But that one thing I really love is a novel that can be a page turner and still ask questions that are not easily answered in the realm of page turner troping. But before I let you go, Anna, I'm really excited to hear if you have some recommendations that you'd like to offer of books that you've read and loved recently that you think the audience might be really excited about.
I do have a very short stack here that I'm going to share with you. So 2 short novels that I love and that came out recently and that everybody should read, that are in the sort of novel poetry space. One is Sound Museum by Pupe Misagi. Do you know of this book? It's by Coffee House. It's a novella they have a new novella series at Coffee House Press. This is incredible. It's sort of a monologue, and it's spoken by a curator at a museum of torture, essentially, who in Iran, and she is touring people through this museum and taking the reader through a harrowing and sometimes darkly comic journey into the complexities and complicities of like the sort of the wars we're in now, and individual and collective psyches. Yeah, it sounds really good,
and
really good. Devastating and really short, and so can and should be. I mean, I think it's a 1-paragraph book. It's one of those, like a Bernhard style. So I recommend reading it all in one sitting. And the other of these short novels is Renee Gladman's newest, My Lesbian Novel, which is so good.
That's been recommended by a number of guests on the show. I haven't read it.
It's so good, and anybody all of Renee's work is so important to me, and it's so specific. This book is even, it's sort of like it's like having a conversation with her poetics, and it's very entertaining, and it's very fun, and it's very meta. And I actually relate to it a lot because she and I spoke about this book in a lot when it was when she wasn't sure she was going to ever write it. So we sort of go way back. But I also think I haven't checked this over with Renee, but I think she feels similar to me that I wrote this book that we're talking about, The Earthquake, thinking I was writing a book about cults and method acting. And now I'm like, well, I still have to write that book. I mean, I wrote this book, but there's another book I have to write because I've done all this research. And this is sort of like a version of Renee's lesbian novel, but I think there might be another lesbian novel to come.
Okay. That's exciting.
So it's great. And then one more that I'm in the middle of, Mari Ruti, who I think is a completely underappreciated theorist. Ruti is her last name. She, do you know her?
I don't.
Her work?
No.
She's a psychoanalytic, a Lacanian kind of, theorist. She passed away a few years ago, very young. And she wrote a lot of books and they're all amazing. So the one that I'm reading now, and this is like, I don't even know how to describe it. I feel like anyone who ever finds themselves reaching for a self-help book, but doesn't want platitudes, and on the other hand, wants like to read Lacan, right? So like she's completely hardcore, but there's also a sort of absolute generosity of spirit and understanding that to write a book and ask people to read a book that engages theoretically, it has to really matter to them. So everything's very, I want to say accessible, but I don't like that word particularly in this vein because I think it's just super generous. Anyway, the one that I happen to be reading now, she wrote her last book, I think that was published before she died, was called Penis Envy, which is great and has more memoir stuff. But this one, which I'm just loving now, is called A World of Fragile Things, Psychoanalysis and the Art of Living. So I guess maybe I will, just going to say, top of my to-do list is Dion's new book, Salvage Readings from the Wreck, which again, I feel like if I'd read that before writing my book, I've had to write my book in the same way. I think it goes over some of the same territories. I'm very excited to read it.
These are, I don't know, well, I've heard much about my lesbian novel, but haven't read it yet. But the other two are totally unfamiliar to me and sound amazing. I want to make sure that my listeners run out and get An Earthquake is a Shaking the Surface of the Earth. It just is, it feels like such an important book for our moment, and yet is kind of living in worlds of both a threat and a really deep and introspective novel about language and translation and authenticity. And it was such a pleasure to get to talk to you about it, Anna.
So great to talk to you. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Anna Moschovakis for coming on to talk about her latest novel, An Earthquake is a Shaking of the Surface of the Earth. You can find links to purchase An Earthquake is a Shaking of the Surface of the Earth and all of Anna's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.